Welcome to WitchLit, a place to talk about the craft of writing and writing the craft. I'm your host, Victoria Raschke, author, publisher, witch, and nosy Scorpio. WitchLit is brought to you by Thousand Volt Press, a family-owned independent publisher established to produce the books we want to see in the world. All our titles can be purchased directly from thousandvoltpress.com or wherever you buy books. If you'd like to support WitchLit, please consider buying us a coffee at ko-fi.com/witchlitpodcast. Awyn Dawn is a pagan high priestess who has been working with spiritual seekers for nearly 10 years. After being incarcerated and overcoming her own life challenges, Awyn dedicated herself to the pagan path and now teaches others. She is Reiki 2 attuned and has a BS in integrative healthcare from MSU Denver. The author of Paganism for Prisoners and Paganism on Parole, Awyn is also a member of the Society of Authors and the International Women's Writing Guild. Her latest book is 111 Magic, out now. Awyn Dawn, welcome back to WitchLit.
Oh, good to see you, Victoria.
It's so nice to have you back on, and I'm excited for your new book.
Thank you, me too.
Yeah, so, usually we ask everybody for the first question, like, why write? But you've answered that on the show. So I guess we'll be a little bit more specific and ask why write this book. So why 111 Magic?
So my first two books, Paganism for Prisoners and Paganism on Parole, have this common theme of like helping people improve. And I wanted to do that, but I also wanted to do something that was a bit more challenging in different ways. And so in Paganism for Prisoners and Paganism on Parole, I don't have a whole lot of spells and rituals. And so for this one, I was like, well, I want to make up for that and do a whole book of spells and rituals and meditations. And really my idea behind it was to design something that could help move people down the spiritual path through practical, actual exercises that could be put into place.
Yeah. Reading it, I was thinking how different it is from the first two books. And I was trying to describe it to my partner. And I was like, it's kind of like a necklace of like spells and rituals and meditations, like you said. And like it's interesting to read straight through. Like, I don't think I would recommend people use it that way. It's just sitting and reading it straight through. But I do like how it builds. Like each thing builds on the next thing. So what was that process like for you it really is 111 spells, rituals, and meditation. So what is the writing process like this compared to like your first two books?
Oh, well, so around spell 98 and 99, I was like, oh, why did I say 111? But writing it, like I kind of looked at what I did with my first books, how they were kind of like, stepping stones. And I wanted to do something like that. So like any good author, I wrote it completely out of order. I would be like on the tube or in class and I'd be like, oh, do one about this. And I'd put a quick note in my phone. And so like I had all these pieces all over the place. Like I had sticky notes all over my desk and now I have virtual sticky notes all over my laptop. And I'd have notes in my phone and some like I recorded and like I did, just kind of however it came to me. And that gave me about 70 of them right there, which was very helpful. But I thought about what a person needs to kind of grow on a spiritual path. And then I said, well, what did I need to grow? What challenges did I face? What do I wish I had that I didn't? And what did I have that worked really well? And so each of the chapters is kind of connected with a theme. And you're right. Like I also wouldn't recommend people just sit down and read them the whole way. It's supposed to be interactive, and it also doesn't mean you have to do all 111. I put a bunch of different flavors in there. So if you only need, one spell for creating safe space, then just do the one. If you feel like you need 4 or 5, do 4 or 5. And I really wanted it to be personal like that, where people could be, oh, I don't know if I'm ready for this one yet, but maybe I could, do one of these other ones. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. And I think you set that up well in the opening. I think you kind of lay that groundwork for readers when they pick up the book and they'll see
I hope so. I hope so.
Yeah. So one of the things I liked a lot was that it was kind of a mix of things. Like there's very clearly like just here's a spell or, here's a meditation for you to do by yourself, but you also include rituals that you can do by yourself, but also you can do with other people. And I was like, oh, like if I was going to do the happy birthday one, like the birthday ritual, I was like, who would I want to do that with? Like, I was like, my family is not particularly witchy. They tolerate me and they sometimes participate, but, like they were all in on the house blessing when we moved, that kind of stuff. But I was like, that would be really fun to do with my family. And I was like, what a great way to kind of incorporate that even for people who don't have a working group to be able to bring other people into the magic. And I just really appreciated that aspect of it.
Well, thanks for that. I actually, when I came up with that one, I thought about like my own childhood and how like I never really had birthday parties, and it's something I always wanted was like a big birthday party with like a bunch of people and, and I figured there must be a lot of people who want that. And, like my family's not particularly witchy either. They also, they tolerate it. They respect that I have my belief systems. It's something we disagree on, but a lot of the spells in there are more nuanced. Some of them you could do, like there's a couple that are set up to do in your office without anybody ever knowing that that's what you're doing. And so I wanted it to be something that you could apply even if you don't have a room that's your altar room, or, maybe you're not out of the broom closet, or maybe you have other reasons, like you've got this space where kids and cats and dogs are running in and out all the time, and people should still be able to work on stuff even when they have life going on.
Yeah, no, and so true. I mean, I think there is this lovely, like, aspirational aesthetic, especially like on Witch Talk and Instagram and stuff like that, that your life is just magical and you live in a fairy cottage and every day is perfect spells and I was like, most of us don't live that life. So I think, speaking to that realism is so important. A lot of people don't even have a place to have a permanent altar in their house. Either there's not room or it's not practical, or they live with people who wouldn't appreciate it. I mean, there's lots of reasons why people might not have that space. I think that's really good to talk about that in books and amongst ourselves, because we can't all be Instagram witches.
Well, and I love that you mentioned the because there's the illusion of witchcraft, and then there's like what it actually is. And I've always been more focused on like the building connection with deity. Like sometimes I just I'm like, oh, okay, I've got a candle. Yeah, no, I guess this candle will work. And like, okay, and I'm gonna put some oil on it. Okay. And that's the first part. And I've made a lot of really successful spells doing just that, because it's great if you can have like the timing and the colors and the season and the right phase of the moon. But that shouldn't be anything that prevents you from doing work, especially self-work. Like, you can take a breather in your car for 5 minutes and do it with intentionality. It's about finding the opportunities. And I live in the city, I live in London now. And luckily London has gorgeous parks, but it also has a lot of people.
Yeah.
So I can't just like pull out my cauldron and take out my, athame and be in the park and like, I can't do all that. There are groups I could do that with, but like in Hyde Park, that would draw a lot of attention that I don't necessarily want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I like that. So one of the things I was thinking about while I was reading the book is like having written a cookbook. There's like, all the recipe testing that goes into like writing a cookbook. And I was like, do people do that with spell books? So like, how does that work? Like when you're writing a spell or a ritual, is it like theory first, or is it like practical practice first, I guess?
It was for 111 Magic, it was a little of both. A lot of the meditations I did, almost all of them, a lot of the spells I did, a lot of the rituals I did. I did not do them all though, because I would probably still be doing them, to
the book
try and
has to come out, right? There is a deadline.
It does have to come out. I did have a deadline. So a lot of it was, and a lot of it, I asked the gods and the spirits to help me with it. So if for a lot of them, there's this thing that I call it downloading, just because I don't know what else to call it. But it's when I'm in the process of writing and something else takes over. And like I go back and like I'm like, oh wow, what I wrote is really good, but I didn't know what I wrote until I reread it.
Yes.
And so a lot of the book came out with that. Like I would sit down and I would write one of these spells or meditations, and I would clack away at my keys and take 74 drinks of coffee and clack away. And when I was all done, I'd go back and read it, and I'd be surprised by what was there. And so a lot of them got done that way.
Yeah. Yeah, I have that experience more writing fiction. Like, I have always called it channeling, somewhat tongue in cheek. But yeah, like I feel like you get in there and you get in the zone and it just kind of flows. And it's so great when it happens. And it's also great to go back and read it and go, did I write that? Instead of, did I write this crap? So,
you're like, wow, that's really good.
Yeah.
I'm impressive.
It's such a pleasant experience over, the constant imposter syndrome. So,
right. Well, I have 3 books and a contract for a couple more. And I'm still like, God, is this really, do I really have the skills to be doing this? Like master's degree, like all, and I'm like, oh, I don't know.
Same. Oh, hard same. Yeah. It's a constant struggle. And I don't, part of me is like, are we this way because we're told that, someone else has to bonk you on the head with a magic wand and call you a writer? Or are we this way because, women are socialized to not trust their voice? I mean, like, I feel like there's so many aspects of it. And I'm like, what? I mean, I've signed contracts. I've published books. What else do I have to do to prove to myself that I'm actually a writer?
$1 million question, isn't it? I mean, I've got some days when I feel more like a writer than others,
Yeah.
Now that I know there's another book on the way and I have to sit down and get it done, I'm like, oh, I'm a writer. Like,
yeah.
When somebody gives me, they're like, oh, actually, would you write this article for us? Like, I've got a couple that are going to be coming out for Witchology in the next few months, So when I get stuff like that, I'm like, maybe I am a writer. But I do think that like socially we're taught, oh, be humble. Be humble. Yes, that's right. And like, I agree that people shouldn't go around boasting like, oh, I'm the greatest ever, but like, it's very hard to learn to take pride in your accomplishments when your whole life you've been told like, oh, actually, oh, you did that with this person, did twice that.
Yeah.
And so I think it's a combination of things. I don't think it's just women, though, because I've heard a lot of men say they have imposter syndrome.
I said that, and I'm like, oh, it also applies to men, too, or non-binary people. I mean, I think we all experience that. But I was thinking, when you were saying that, it's like, but I don't know any dentists who are like, am I really a dentist? I mean, they went to school. You and I both went to school for creative writing. Like, it shouldn't be different. And I wonder if it's because there is this aspect of validation by being published. And so even once you've had that experience, if you don't have something on their horizon, it's like, oh, they figured out I don't know what I'm doing. Like I think it's because it's not like a clock in every day and someone says, oh, you're here to put in your writer hours. You might do that yourself, but no one is paying attention to that.
Maybe, but I think there's also an aspect of it, like when you study to be a dentist, right? They're like, you went through schooling, you have certified, you are now a dentist. With writers, I mean, look, I'm all for like, everybody, wanting to write creatively, but like there's a lot of work and skill involved in being a writer. And I think it's one of those things where like, I can't even tell you how many times I've told people like I've written books and they're like, oh yeah, me too. It's just a thing. And like that really, it's not the same though. It's not like anybody can like put words on a page, right? Like anybody can do that. But when you make your career as a writer, it, there's like different pieces that are involved, if that makes sense. It's like you make your living as a writer. It means you have a duty to, keep trying things out, to keep going for contracts, to keep pitching ideas, and so I think part of it is that like it's not thought of as like this, oh, you studied to be a writer. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a writer too. And I think that like devalues it in some ways for some people.
Yeah, maybe I hadn't thought about it that way, because I've also had the opposite happen when you tell people you're a writer and they look at you like you're a unicorn. Like it's a weird liminal place to live in, I guess.
I've had that happen too, where like, I told somebody I wrote a book early on and they're like, oh my God, like I had, cured cancer, gone to space. So you're right. Both of those exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's just funny to me, and I don't think it's unique to writing. I mean, I have artist friends, and they have a similar experience, and it's gotten so much harder to make a living as a creative. Like the days of first book $10,000 advances and stuff like that don't happen for everybody anymore. A lot of advances, especially in our niche world, aren't that big. They're just not. You can't live on them while you're writing the book, even sometimes.
Right.
So yeah, I think it's, partly that, and, partly, just the weird space we live in. Like capitalism makes being a creative really hard.
Well, more than that though, but like, think about like all the AI books now that like, or like how many like Facebook stories have you seen do you remember when they had that werewolf story? And it would just be like the same ad. And it was that horribly written, like werewolf story. Mm-hmm. And, like that makes it hard to be taken seriously as a writer. Yeah. When like that, like that's writing. No, that's not writing. That's somebody threw that together. And that's kind of offensive to writers.
Yeah,
but like,
and copied it, and basically plagiarized other writers to put it together when you were talking about AI writing. I know the best comment I've heard about AI, and I'll have to source the person who said it, but I think it was on Threads or Instagram. It was like, why should I bother reading it if a person couldn't bother writing it? If it's AI generated, like it. And to me, that's plus it's just plagiarism at this point. So.
No, I do think AI has its place though, because I love using it for research. Like AI can like, if you're like, I need the top 45 boys' names from the 1800s, England, upper class families, they're like, here you go, or you need to know like certain things, because Google can't really tell you much anymore.
It's Google got like the trash. Google is trash now. Yeah.
It's like 7 ads and then like maybe you get a link. So like for research, AI is amazing. Mm-hmm. And I think as long as creatives are using it like that way and not to like do the actual work, I'm fine with AI. Yeah. The problem is there will always be somebody who abuses it.
Yeah. And I mean, in things like Grammarly and like the grammar check in Word and things like that, I mean, they also are kind of reliant on AI. So, I mean, I think there is stuff going on there. And even to call it AI at that level, it's really large language modeling. It's really not artificial intelligence in the way that I think that phrase is initially supposed to mean.
Well, we don't even, AI now isn't what we think of. Like most people think of like this open AI that like creates these brand new things, and like AI as it stands now is really closed, which means all it can do is pull from stuff that already exists.
Right. Yeah. The argument that's happened lately that just irritates me is people saying, oh, they can tell it's AI because they used like a certain word. And I was like, you do realize that they got that word from someone's actual writing. Like that's not a way to tell if it's AI. You can't say, oh, they use the word delve, so therefore it must be AI. And
I'm like, use delve.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it's a great word. It's a great word. So, so I'm like, just because someone used a 50-point bonus word does not mean it's AI. That's right. That's really not fair to writers who read a lot and have an expansive vocabulary. That's not fair to them.
That's true, because like a lot of words, I'm like, oh, I've been waiting to use this one. I'm going to,
I can still point to one of those. In one of my books, I got to use the word glaucous, which is like one of my favorite words. And I still think about it now. And I'm always afraid that because I was so attached to it, that it would push somebody else out of the book. but it's just such the perfect description of that like ocean blue gray where you can't tell sky and sea apart, you know, like it's the
Glaucus.
I know. Isn't it a great word?
I'm stealing that. Like,
Yes,
Glaucus
please
is
do.
going
Let's
in.
bring back Glaucus as like every day.
Glaucus.
Yeah. I mean, I'm a word nerd. It's one of the reasons I love language is just the word nerdiness of it. If I wasn't a writer, I'd probably be a linguist.
When you have to find that perfect word, like run, jog, like now I'm freezing up now that I have to think about one on the spot. But like there's a bunch of like you can say blue, you can say cerulean, you can say sea blue, you can say light blue, you can say turquoise, you know, and all these things are going to have a different impact on your story.
Right. Yeah, because each reader will have an association with that particular shade of or color, and then you get into like even like colors in different languages. Like when you were saying blue, I was thinking like Slovenian has this word like bistra, which is like clear, like pure blue of water. Like it's very specific. And like and English has those too, but a lot of other languages have them, and we steal them because English is, you know, 3 languages in a trench coat as it is. So, I mean, I love that just aspect of language of just being able to nerd out on that kind of stuff.
One of my favorite French words is parapluie, which is umbrella.
Oh,
and I just parapluie. I don't know why I love it. I think it's the alliteration in the word in the word.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we should both just like start putting in random words and like make people look them up.
Yes. Well, I mean, I always love that when I'm reading and I encounter a word that I've never seen before, like that immediately go to the dictionary, either online
like
or
glaucus.
You know, when the first time I started, and another one I really love is smaggardine. And I'm probably not even saying that right because I've never heard anyone pronounce it, but it's a specific shade of emerald green. And I read it in a poem in high school. And I can still tell you like where exactly it came from. And it's just one of those words like you want to use, you know, like how do I work this into a book? Because and I mean, it's an archaic kind of emerald green word, you know, but why did we stop using it? Let's bring it back.
And like you said, there's some great ones like overmorrow is like like everybody's like, we don't have a word for the day after tomorrow. I'm like, overmorrow.
We do.
I'm like, overmorrow.
Yes. Yeah. Yes. I mean, people have seemed to bring back Fortnite. Like, I think that word, I see it more like I've heard it on podcasts a lot, which I think is interesting. But I'm like,
that's a game that my nephews absolutely love. They love Fortnite.
Or 2 weeks, you know,
or 2 weeks.
So let's, you know, overmorrow is right up there. Let's use it. So.
Yeah. Everybody, your assignment is to go use overmorrow.
And there's also yestermorrow, which is the day before yesterday, which I also love.
Yestermorrow.
Yeah.
I think you have to say it in an accent. Overmorrow.
Have you found yourself picking up a British accent now that you live in the UK?
Sometimes. It depends on who I'm talking to. It's certain words, though, like I'll be talking to my friends back home and they'll be like, oh, you have a slight accent. And I'm like, I do. And so I think it just depends. But yeah, a lot of words like I call chips and crisps. You know, I've got those and I use in it a lot.
Yeah.
So
I feel like slang is really easy to pick up when you're talking socially with people. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's easy. And I try not to have an accent around when I'm in a group of British people. Like, I think my accent gets stronger and I try not to because I'm like, I'm not trying to mock you guys.
Yeah.
But like the guy I'm seeing he's like North London. So his accent's very much like this. And it's very like, after I speak with him for a while, I have some of those words too.
My husband, people can tap their bingo card. It's from Trinidad. And he says schedule. And every now and then I will catch myself saying it, not because I would ever think to pronounce it that way, but the last time I heard anyone say it was him. And then I'll say schedule. I had a friend who did a year abroad in the UK. And the thing that she caught that she could not really correct easily when she got home is in hospital versus in the hospital. And people would just look at her really funny. And I was like, no, it's very British to say in hospital. And she just picked it up without even realizing it.
Yeah, I think there's a few like that. Like go to the shops.
Mm-hmm.
I was just in America. I just got back actually earlier this week, and I was like, oh, I'm gonna go to the shops, and like, you know, it's just not a thing. You go to the store, you go to the grocery store, you go to the
you go to Target. You know, you name the place you're going.
Yeah. No, I'm just gonna pop over to the shops.
Yeah. I mean, I think, well, and it's funny, you know, again, like, you know, word nerd kind of stuff. Like, I think if you read a lot of either translations into English or British writers, or to some extent Canadian and Australian writers too, like you pick up things in what you read and you don't really realize it until you say it. And then someone looks at you funny and you're like, oh yeah, I guess that is not really a US kind of English thing to say. So
I think one of the biggest challenges has been spellings.
Yeah.
Because like words like realize have an S here instead of a Z.
Mm-hmm.
And so like I catch myself like, you know, working on this book for Crossed Crow and like spelling things the British way, or, you know, if I spell them the American way, I've got, you know, my document set up so it does British spellings because I need those more often. And like, so I think that one's, it's probably going to be released with a lot of like colors with a U and then a bunch with not with a U. And
yeah, I worked as an editor when I lived in Slovenia, and there was a mix of Brits and Americans. And finally, the director just kind of set us all down and goes, look, if you're British, edit in British. If you're American, edit in American, because we've released a lot of things that have both, because neither one of you will correct something because you know it's right in the other. So just make it all American or make it all British. And I was like, okay, that makes way more sense. Because like I wasn't going to, you know, tell someone you can't spell check with a Q because it's correct in British English. But, you know, but then if you're going to spell check with a Q, you got to spell color with a U. So, yeah.
I think it's better with a U anyway.
Yeah. I mean, you know, Webster did us dirty in some ways. But, oh, yeah, I love word nerding. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Me too. I'm like,
so you mentioned the book for Crossed Crow. So what is going on now? We talked before, and people did not get to hear that, but you did just finish grad school. So do you want to talk about like kind of where things are for you, like in life with finishing school and new projects?
Sure. So I'm going to be renewing my visa. I love living in England. It's amazing, and it's totally shifted my worldview in a lot of ways. I'm working, so I just finished 111 Magic. Plug for the book, yay! Well, I didn't just it just came out. I finished it like a year ago. It just came out.
Yeah.
In August in the U.S. and September, and so Crossed Crow Books, they're actually commissioning 3 of my works. They're going to do the updated versions of Paganism for Prisoners and Paganism on Parole. I think those are coming out next year, but I haven't received a date yet. So it could be 2025, 2026, but new versions of those. And they commissioned me to write a book called Writing Magic. That name might change, as names sometimes do, but it's kind of this, you know, how do you create magic with your words, and how do you use magical principles to help you with your writing? So which gods do you contact? How can meditation help you create characters? How, you know, how should you set up your writing space? The history of writing is actually what I've been doing now. Not just the history of writing, but the history of writing and magic. And so like in China, like the first writing that was also magical was the use of like tortoiseshells and bones for divination. And so there's like a lot of history in it like that. And then, you know, I'm going to talk about things like place writing, and there's going to be lots of writing tips and tricks. So it's going to be this beautiful balance of writing and magic, but it's not going to be one or the other. You know, there's a lot of books about like, this is how you create a character, and this is how you do storyline, and this is, you know, and so it'll have some of that, but it's going to be from a magical point of view, because like we talked about, the download process earlier. I think was that before we started this.
No, I think that was actually on recording.
Okay. We talked for quite a little while beforehand. So, yeah. Like how to get into that downloading process, how to encourage that to happen. These kinds of things, so there's a lot of practical knowledge, but also, just a little witchy flavor. So I'm very excited about this book.
Yeah, that is exciting. And I think will be of interest to our listeners, because I know we have a lot of writer folks who listen to. So for you, like in that vein, like, is there a spirit or deity that you feel especially called to as a writer?
Well, when it comes
if you feel like sharing, if you don't want to share that.
Oh yeah, no, that's fine. So it's interesting, like the Morrigan, even though she's not for writing specifically, is like so predominant. Like I shut my eyes to go into meditation, she shows up. Like she's like, like we're working together. So she gives me a lot of that, like fiery, deeper, like delving in, the dark soul of the writer exposed on page. She gives me a lot of that. But for more creative, more creatively geared deities, like Breed's a great one, and she's very prominent here in Britain.
Yeah,
and I think that's why the Morrigan's so prominent too. She's just like here, and so a lot of the deities from here and from like Scandinavia have such a strong influence here that they're usually the ones I work with when I need creative influence.
Yeah, and that makes sense to me. And it's been interesting for me personally, like, because in my fiction, I write about a lot of deities, and sometimes they wind up sticking around, and sometimes they're like, I'm just here for the press, and they're gone. But Minerva is one that's really stayed with me, and I have continued to work with her in lots of different ways. But that kind of creative spark ideas thing is really strong. That's kind of like we were talking, like when I sit down, I think, okay, like Minerva's here kind of thing when I sit down to write.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think there's a lot people could use, but there's also this like universal feminine energy, many would call her Gaia, but like when I'm in that downloading, I don't think that's any specific deity. I think that's like a direct hard line into the universe, So you could argue that, like, even though that's not a deity, like it is in a way.
Yeah. I wonder if that's what a lot of people have called the muse over time too.
So, and I can't forget the muses.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I feel like there's, again, I think there is something about being creative and just being open to that, like whatever your outlet is, cooking, writing, painting, sculpture, dance, music, whatever. I think there's something about being open to that channel or whatever it is that it's hard not to be a little mystical about it. I mean, I know there are people who are very cut and dried about things, but I mean, there are people who are mystical about math. I mean, I think math has a lot of mysticism in it too. And
sure does.
I love that idea of just having, to take the time in a book to kind of examine how we work with things that maybe we can't explain, even if you're not particularly witchy. Like if you're just a creative, like how do you couch the creative spark even?
Yeah. And that's the question, isn't it? And like, is spark enough, or do you need the talent to back it up? Like there's no one answer. It's like one of those philosophical debates you could have. Like if somebody starts off, with not a lot of writing skills, like does that limit how far they can go, or are they limitless and like they can go as far as they're willing to study and learn? And like how much of it is talent and how much of it is skill and how much is education and how much is pure raw luck?
Yeah. Oh yeah, the pure raw luck part, I think, it's like you could secretly be the best piano player on the entire planet, but if no one sits you down in front of a piano at any point in your life, would you know? I mean, like, who knows? Like what, like you said, like what's innate and what is accumulated? I don't know.
Yeah. Interesting to think about, but
yeah,
fortunately, we don't need any answers.
Right.
You know,
it's a constant exploration of that idea. So
come up with an answer before we leave the show. Oh, no pressure, no pressure.
Oh, yeah. I'm the older I get, the less I am willing to like say, no, this is the answer. This is the one. This is the way. You know, it's like the more you know, the less you know. So
exactly.
Or the less you realize, you know, I don't know.
Well, I think with writing, like the more you read, like the better you become. Because I'll read somebody's book and like I always compare mine and I'm like, mine is horrible compared to this book. Yeah, even though it's not. My books are great. Buy my books. But like I'm always like Julia Armfield. She's one of my favorite authors, and the books she writes are like this beautiful blend of poetry and prose, and they're a little witchy too, especially like Our Wives Under the Sea is just, it's got this metaphysical kind of essence to it, and it's so well done. And I'm like, oh, I want to write like her, you know, and the truth, I'll never write like her, but that doesn't mean that my writing's not good and doesn't exist. It's just, she has this poetic talent. And if you haven't read her books, I highly recommend them because they challenge what you think you can do with writing, because you read these books and you're like, you almost know what's going on. Like you kind of know what's going on, but you're never quite sure what's going on. And I love that.
Yeah. There's something about being trusted as a reader in that way too. Like not having, like I'm always interested in that line with fiction about how much do you absolutely spell out the reader so they know what's going on, and how much do you leave it open to them to interpret. And I want to fall on the side of trusting the reader because I love when I feel like I'm trusted as the reader. So
yeah, I think it depends on what kind of books you're writing too. Like in the books for like Llewellyn and Crossed Crow books, like I'm much more like, this is what you do and this is why and this is the logic behind it.
Yeah.
But I finished a piece of fiction. I'm calling it American Glass, and it's out to agents, so keep your fingers crossed for that. But a lot in that I had to decide like how much to tell and how much to let unfold, and it was really an interesting process because like there's elements of fact in it. Like it's fiction, but there's like it flows into truth sometimes, and I love anything that experiments with literature. Like you can do so much with it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, I think that is limitless. I mean, it's a weird mix of that. You know, there's no new stories, and how you tell them is limitless. So,
yeah.
But yeah, well, good luck on that. Hopefully an agent will snap that up and get it out to the right publisher soon.
I hope so.
But I do love fiction that builds on reality. Like even, you know, fantasy that still builds on things we know, you know, like this idea. And it's one of the reasons I've also really, I love alternate history fiction, because it fascinates me, the ideas about like, you know, I guess it's that, you know, a butterfly flaps its wings kind of thing. But like one thing changes and the whole world is different from that. So I've just always loved that idea in fiction.
See, I'm kind of hit or miss with that because I'm such a history nerd that I find myself, that's not what happened. You know, even though that's kind of the point. But that's why genres exist, you know?
Yeah,
like,
exactly. Yeah. I mean, there's genre for everyone. There's genre for everyone.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like as we're recording, I had a short story come out in an anthology this week, and it's very romance oriented, which I don't usually write, but I have a lot of romance author friends, so I like to play with them. And I was like, if someone picked this up as the first thing from me, they would be shocked by the next thing they read. But I kind of like that too, you know, like I kind of like stepping outside of your persona sometimes to write something else. So
Yeah, I think that's why I adopted a different pen name for my fictional work.
Mhm.
It's like two different characters that
Yeah.
I get to be. And I love that, but it makes social media very difficult. But
yes. Yeah. Well, and so far my I call them pen names, but like for my fantasy, I'm just me. I'm Victoria Rashke. And then for romance, I'm VJ Rashke. So it's still me, but it's a play on it. And then for my nonfiction stuff that's coming out with Crosscrow and Llewellyn, it's Victoria J. So to just make it a little, like, it's still me, but it is a different aspect of me. I didn't go full pen name, but I was like, yeah, it's, readers need a hint of what they're going to get. I agree with you. Yeah.
Well, like, I think when I decided, because Awyn Dawn is a pen name, it's not my birth
Shocking.
name. But
I'm so surprised.
I know. But I think when I decided it was because I knew my books were going to be going into prison, and so like I wanted, a degree of separation.
Right. No, that totally
between
makes sense.
that.
Yeah.
But I think it seems like such a like at the time when you're deciding pen name versus no pen name, it seems like the biggest question in the world.
Yes.
And then like once you have like one, you're like, oh, I write under 7 different names, and there,
it's just how it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think when I published the first time, like the dream had always been to see my name on the spine of a book. So I was like, I'm just going to use my name. And I had conversations with a couple friends who are writers who published under their initials or published under pen names. And they were like, it kind of depends. Like there was this whole discussion about, especially in fantasy, would it be better to not have a feminine name? And part of me was like, screw that. I don't care. If you're not going to read my book because you think a woman can't write fantasy, then you're not going to enjoy my book anyway, because it's centered on, things that are supposedly what women write about, like found family and, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, if you think you're coming in for something else, then maybe you won't enjoy it anyway. So maybe I'm just being honest up front. And then for romance, that I went with my initials, which I find funny. I probably should have done it the other way around, according to most people, but I kind of like how it is. So I'm just going to go with it.
If you ever wanted to experiment, you could call yourself Vic. You'd just be Vic.
Exactly. No one would know. No one would know until they saw a picture of me. And then they might still wonder. So yeah, that's a whole different fraught thing. And I've talked to a couple of people on the show about it, especially writing in like the occult space, because so many people don't use their names just for, either safety or privacy, or, I have a day job that if they knew I wrote witchy books, I probably couldn't keep, whatever the reason. But it is funny to me how even a pen name taken just to be a pen name still becomes a persona in its way. And it just fascinates me that's maybe another whole aspect for your writing magic book.
Maybe it is. To pen name or not to pen name? Yeah. That is the question.
Yeah. And it's like, what does it mean to, produce work under a different name? What does that bring to the table? And does it allow you to, take on a different personality as you do that?
And it's, that's a really interesting question. Because like Awyn Dawn is like, she's still part of me, but like a very specific, this part, and I wonder how that influences writing too. Like I could see how it could either allow you to be more creative, or maybe like, you're like, no, this character wouldn't write that, but this one would.
Yeah. 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 And mine are really delineated kind of by genre. I mean, honestly, like I said, it's fiction, nonfiction, but in the fiction, there's the fantasy, the contemporary fantasy name, and then the romance name. So
I think if I ever wrote romance, I would want my name to be like Lady something.
Yeah. I think part of the reason I didn't go in Victoria for romance, because there's so many Victorias writing romance. Like it is kind of a romance name. And I was like, yeah, maybe I'll do something else with that. So, yeah.
I hadn't considered that.
Yeah, there's I don't know if she's still famous now, but a very famous like gothic bodice ripper writer from the 80s called Victoria Holt. And when I read romance in the 80s, when I probably shouldn't have been reading some of the stuff I was reading, I read a lot of her books because they were very gothic, and I was very into gothic romance. So shocking, goth girl into gothic romance. But yeah, I read a lot of Victoria Holt in the 80s.
Well, you might enjoy Gina Showalter if you ever get around to it.
She's been on my list for a while. Several people have recommended her to me. I maybe just need to dig in.
Fantastic. I started with her Lords of the Underworld series.
Oh, y'all Reyes. Are missing Awyn fanning herself.
Oh, Reyes, you poor troubled soul.
Yeah.
It's so good.
Yeah. I think the gothic romance came out of reading Wuthering Heights, which now as an adult reading Wuthering Heights, I'm like, y'all just both need some therapy and to calm the hell down. It's hard to read as an adult because you're just like, whoa, we like one adult conversation here. Just one adult conversation. Y'all would have been better people. So.
I think Jane Eyre's kind of like that too, because, there's that, she just goes off to become I'm like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Like, you can work through this.
Yeah. And boy, Wide Sargasso Sea changed my take on Jane Eyre permanently. So.
I don't remember if oh, yes, I have read that one. Yeah.
Like, that never makes you look at Bertha in the attic the same way after you read Wide Sargasso Sea. So, yeah. It's funny to me, like, the classic lit that I read because that was what we read in high school. Although we did not read Jane Eyre or Wuthering Heights in high school. That was me just being a nerd in the library. But yeah, like it's so, I'm sure it influenced my writing in ways I don't even really understand. But it's interesting to me how these canon works continue to morph and change, like with as our lens on them changes. And I'm kind of fascinated by that too. Like, I don't know that anything I've written is going to be around in 200 or 300 years. But I love that the things that we still read that are 100, 200, 300 years old, we have such a different perspective than when they were written. Like, we can't really read them in context anymore.
No. And I think, like, I'm very much, like, even though our context changes, I'm very much a purist when it comes to changing books. Like, I'm like, you have to put it in the context it was written in. Because I would be horrified if I wrote something I worked very hard on, and in 100 years somebody came through and changed it and I didn't have a say in it. Like, I'd be absolutely horrified if that happened, especially if it wasn't my intent, like, I said spaghetti was good, and 100 years in the future, like, nobody loves spaghetti anymore. I would feel sorry.
How dare you talk about spaghetti?
Yeah, I would feel so sad for the future.
Yeah. Although, I think there's also authors doing really interesting derivative works. Like, I love Laurie R. King's series about Sherlock Holmes. Like, as an old man, like, I think it starts with a beekeeper's apprentice, maybe. And that might be the wrong name. But
I think I have that book on my shelf. It's in my massive TBR pile.
But I like her take on this, like, elderly Sherlock Holmes and his very young apprentice who then becomes his wife. It's an interesting take on it, and he still has the foibles that he has in Conan Doyle's writing, but he's a little more humanized in her work, which I think is interesting. He's a little more fallible, I guess, in her work, which I think is, more contemporary, more modern, whatever word you want to use. So, yeah.
I have to read those because I'm a big Sherlock Holmes fan.
Yeah, that was what got me sucked into them, because I'd read all of Conan Doyle stuff, and so now I love to track down weird takes on Sherlock Holmes. So,
yeah,
good stuff all around.
They must have done something right if we're still talking about them all this time.
Yeah,
later.
I think maybe we can also have that luck. I don't know.
I hope so. I hope like somebody picks up one of my works, whether it's one of my works on paganism, or whether it's American Glass, or one of the other 75 fiction books that are in here percolating. And they're like, oh, what can we learn from that? What does this say about the generation? And they analyze it and argue about it in universities. And no, it means this. No, it can't mean that. It has to mean this.
Yeah, because, for me, thinking like that is also hopeful that we have a future on a planet that's on fire. So So I like that as a, a mental exercise to think about what that could be like in the future. It's a little bit of hope as praxis, I guess. So,
yeah. I mean, one thing is for sure, nature always recovers. Whether we're here when she does that or not is yet to be seen, but nature will recover.
Yeah. Yeah. The planet will abide for a few more billion years. Who knows? Till it's swallowed by the sun or whatever. I will not be around to see them.
They've found those microbes like deep in the ocean that can eat plastic, like that they don't think existed 100 years ago. There's like, so, I mean,
we've given it enough food to live on, so
forever and ever and ever.
Yeah, I think one of the, this is totally off topic, but I'm fascinated by it. And for me, nothing is wasted on a writer, right? Everything is potential plot bunny. But
exactly.
It was some photograph of like a Yoplait container from the 70s on a beach. And I was like, wow. Yeah. Like that stuff, every plastic toy you had as a kid, every toothbrush you've ever owned, they're all somewhere in a landfill or in the ocean. Like it is kind of overwhelming to think about. So
as I drink from my plastic bottle, but it's okay because this is made from like sustainable plastic or something. I
was like, it's gray. It's probably ocean plastic. So, yeah, it's it's such a weird. I know. I often wonder if you just stop and really think about like the immensity of things in our existence, like it's a little overwhelming. And I kind of understand why people have tunnel vision and live in their bubble, because you can break your own brain really easily. So.
I like to break it on a regular basis.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, it's good to have a quiet spot to recover, which is a good reason to pick up Awyn's book, by the way.
Oh yeah, we're here to talk about my book. That's right. We're like, anyway, and then this is how you reconstitute a mastodon from genetic material.
Yeah. Like you can break your brain on that, and then you can do a spell to find your safe place. So, yeah, I mean, it's good to be both, and really, truly, I do believe nothing is wasted on a writer. Like I think we somehow filter all of our experience, everything we read, everything we encounter. It gets filtered through our work somehow. Even if it's not overt. Oh, eavesdropping is the best.
I know we're not supposed to, but like some of my conversations that I've written have been inspired by like actual interactions between people.
Yeah.
Because like I think that's one of the, like when people say, hey, can you, give me feedback on my work? The number one thing is dialogue. Like it's always dialogue because people write what they think it's supposed to sound like.
Right.
Instead of just writing what it sounds like. You go in to order coffee. You don't say, excuse me, sir, are you having a good day? I would like a coffee. Like, that's not how we talk.
No.
So.
And even to some extent, you can't write dialogue exactly how we talk because we pause and we and ah and we repeat ourselves. And there's a lot of things that if you had to read that, it's really boring. I mean, it's like a weird, like, I think dialogue in books is like a distillation of how we think we talk and how we actually talk. It's like somewhere in between.
Right. It's kind of like if you're editing this, you're probably going to take out all the ums and, pregnant pauses and stuff like that. It's like, it's very similar. You take out the pregnant pauses and the ums and you get the content and you drop people into situations and.
Yeah. Yeah, my favorite, thing that happens in books that I don't think happens in conversations very often in reality is like when two people are talking and one of them has an epiphany about something and the world just completely stops. Like, I don't think that happens in real life very often. But I love it when it happens in books. Like when it just like a phrase someone says, like change the whole trajectory of the story. Like I love when that happens, but I don't know how often that happens in reality.
I mean, it does happen sometimes, though. Like, I've been lost in thought or, like, done something and just been sitting there thinking about something and drinking my cup of coffee. And, an hour passed and, like, what did I even think about? And so, like, it would be nice, though, if when I got an epiphany about life, like, everybody around me broke into song or they paused, like, the streets of London just stop so that I can have that
the
moment.
heavens open.
But I mean, for me, they do.
Yeah.
For me, you know, everybody else might still be walking, but for me, like it's, oh, I must find a pen.
Yeah.
I must record this idea before, because the worst thing you can ever say is I'll remember. That's a lie.
Oh,
Such a lie.
Yeah. That so I am an avid notebook keeper. I have one by the bed. I have one on my desk. I have one in my bag. You know, I've just got a notebook everywhere. And I always write in the front of them this Jack London quote, and I will mess it up. But it's basically, you know, like keep a notebook and write every stray thought in it, because paper and pencil will last much longer than your brain will, basically. Like you will not remember this thing that you think you will ever. And like a lot of times I will write stuff when I wake up from a dream, and then I will read it when I'm fully awake, and I'm like, that is absolute garbage. But occasionally there are pearls in there. So I do still do it. But
I'm also an avid notebook keeper. I don't have like, you know, them all over the house, but I have one that I carry absolutely everywhere with me. Like if I'm leaving to go someplace, it's coming with me.
Yeah.
And then a lot of notes on the phone. And ever since I discovered laptop sticky notes, like I'm like, this is the best thing ever, because I've got like 70 of them.
Yeah. Laptop sticky notes or desktop sticky notes are great. Otherwise, my computer would be framed with sticky notes all the time.
I kept losing them. Like I had regular sticky notes and they would fall off, and I would forget to do stuff, and I'd find it crumpled up someplace, or it'd go in my pocket and I'd wash it.
Yeah. Although I say that talking to you and looking at, and there are currently 3 sticky notes on my computer. But
3's pretty good though. 3 is a manageable number.
Yeah. One of them is a recipe. One is a reminder to call somebody, and one is a little affirmation that basically says, I've got this. So, but I've got this one stays. It's always there. But just to remind me through my imposter syndrome that I'm actually doing the thing I'm saying I'm doing. So, as you know, we have this last question.
Yes.
That I will ask. But before that, I would like to give you an opportunity to plug. We've talked about some of your upcoming projects, but where can people find you? All that good stuff.
So I recently started a new Substack and a new YouTube channel. They both, bear with me, they've got a couple things on them, but you can start there. They're called Literary Magic. So it's literary_magic. There will be more things, I promise. You can also find me on Facebook at Awyn Dawn Official, on Instagram at Awyn Dawn, on Twixer, that's what I call it now, at Awyn Dawn. Yes, those are the main ones. You can find my book, 111 Magic, on Llewellyn. You can also, and this is actually a method I prefer, you can go to your local witchy bookshop and you can ask them for it or have them order it, because I believe in supporting small book businesses.
Yep.
So you can do that. It is, however, available, you know, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, all those places, if the other options don't work for you.
Mm-hmm. Or Waterstones, probably, if you're in the UK.
Oh, yeah. Waterstones. I don't think they carry my stuff yet, but so everybody living in the UK should go ask them to order my books so they start carrying them.
There you go. So. And Canadians, what's Indigo, right? So.
Well, yeah, and there's this the Atlantis bookshop does carry my books, by the way,
nice.
And that's in London. Geraldine's a lovely woman, so
yeah, Atlantis is old school. That's old school.
Yeah, the Gardner Room. I've gotten to teach a class in there.
I haven't gotten to teach. I have visited it when I went to London, but I haven't attended an event there and taught there. But that's awesome.
Well, if you're going to be in London on, I think it's November 9th, from 2 to 5, I will be teaching. I'll be doing one of the meditations from my book. We'll be working with Psyche. So it's going to be a lot of fun. You'll be able to contact the Atlantis Bookshop to get tickets.
Cool. Sounds good. And I think this will actually come out in January, but people can keep an eye on your website for new other ones. But we'll leave that in there because people may have attended and enjoyed it.
Okay.
So, but yeah. Oh, that's awesome. So last time you were on the show, you answered the money question. So I'm going to take that one out.
Okay.
So we'll see what you get this time. Oh, and we'll put all that in the show notes, by the way. I forgot to say that.
I'm really impressed that you remember which question I answered.
Oh, I didn't remember. I went back and listened. That's the beauty of having it all on a website. I just pulled it up and listened to the end because I was like, what did she answer last time?
I'm like, I had no idea what I answered last time.
2, sex, which is what you wanted last time. So,
okay.
Are you up for this?
Sure.
So I was thinking when I was reading the book. So this book is 111 Magic is very focused on personal growth and reclaiming your power. So I was thinking about what advice would you give someone to use the book if like one of the issues they're trying to resolve is feeling disconnected from their body or like sexual intimacy? Like, how would you maybe give them advice on how to approach it using the book?
Oh, wow, that's a good question. You know, the thing to understand is that none of the spells or rituals in my book are a quick fix, right? They're not the immediate cure for all your end all be alls. Mm-hmm. So I would say that the first thing is to be prepared that it's going to take a little time. You can find a ritual that you like or a spell that you like, and you might need to repeat it 2 or 3 or 5 or 75 times, to get the desired result. But it's something worth working on. And a big point that I have in my book is focused on like real things, like tangible things. Like if you have body scars, like I have scars from where I had a surgery a couple years ago, like embrace those, mm-hmm. And the book there's a lot of rituals in there that work on like there's one where you stand in front of a mirror and you just love all the parts of yourself. And, those parts include the scars. They include like I had an accident over the summer and I lost the tip of this finger. And, so learning to love that part of myself, it takes time and it takes patience, but it's reality. This is a fact of my world now. And so like, that's how you use the book, is by finding like, even when you're in a magical world, like there's still reality to it, mm-hmm. right? Like you can go into meditation, but if you jump off a building, you can't fly. Like there are limitations to what magic can do. And so knowing these kind of very grounded, very real things about yourself, like, look, my scars aren't going to go away. I'm going to have those. And, a lot of what my book talks about is finding these other sources of self-love that don't come from social media validation, that don't come from like, oh, I have to be perfect and wear 80 pounds of makeup or I'm not worth anything. They come from finding all these other pieces of yourself. And that's what I want people to do with this book, because one of my inspirations for writing it was looking around and seeing there's a lot of people who are very sick, and I'm not perfect by any means, but I have done a lot of work, and I used to be very, very sick, like mentally just not good with myself or my life or anything in it. And it, my hope is that people will take some of these and they'll start making the forward progress. Little steps are fine. Big steps are fine. Medium-sized steps are fine, but know that it's going to take you more than one. It will. I'm just like anybody who reads my book expecting it to be a cure-all for everything that ails them is going to be disappointed. But it can put you on that path to healing. And that path is important because we don't get to be done. There's no end point. There's no just, oh, you've learned everything you need to learn. You just get to be done. Like, we don't get to be done. When we learn a set of lessons, we get a new set of lessons.
Yes. Yeah.
Always.
And sometimes you get the same lesson because you thought you learned it, but maybe you didn't.
But you didn't. Yeah.
No, I like that. And I think really focusing on the fact that it is all a process is so important. Yeah, I mean, there's I don't know that human life would be what it is if there was a point where we just got to sit back on our laurels and whatever, like I think it's the fact that there's always something to learn. There's always something to grow, change is part of what makes us human a little bit. And I don't like the idea. I mean, the end point is you die. The end point isn't that you don't have anything left to do.
So. But then you get to start it over again, depending on if you believe in reincarnation or not. You get to come back with a brand new set of lessons. So.
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully better ones. Hopefully you come back, starting from a different point, if nothing else. So.
Yeah. But I mean, I like to think, humans, a lot of us become so comfortable just like in really bad situations. Mm-hmm. Like we adapt, so, we can be in really bad situations and tell ourselves that we're okay with it.
Yeah.
We can, oh, I hate my job, but, I've been told my whole life that I'm horrible, so I'm not going to try to do this thing. That there's a lot of lies that we tell ourselves. And something that I've really come to value living over here is the power of honesty, even when it's uncomfortable, mm-hmm. even when it's icky and it's not nice and it doesn't make you feel good. Like it's still important, because if you can't admit that you have flaws about yourself, like physical ones, you can't really do that much about. I mean, like you can go to the gym, you can work out, things like that. But some things you're just stuck with,
Yeah.
But there's other things, like if you're like, wow, I'm really mean to people on Sundays, like you can work on that. You can change that, and you have an absolute obligation to change that. If you're like, oh, well, I'm mean to people on Sunday, just guess that's who I am. Like, yeah. Like you're going to stay in the same cycle. So, and it's uncomfortable to get out of that changing cycle, but it's so important. Like, and I'm speaking to my past self here now too, because like I spent a decade in drug addiction, I spent a really long time making the same bad decisions over and over and over and over and over and over. And so that's how I know what I'm talking about, is because I've done this, mm-hmm. So sorry to go off on my tangent there.
No, I think it's important, and it's all learning, it's all good, and art can be all good if you're moving forward. So I think that's a hopeful note to end on. So thank you.
You're welcome.
It's always a delight to talk to you, and I'm excited about all the stuff you have coming.
Thank you. I'm really I'm gonna have 5 books. And it's still imposter syndrome. Still.
Well, great. Well, take care, and I'm sure we will talk again.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. WitchLit is a production of 1000 Volt Press and is edited by Julian Rashke. Our intro music is Cosmic Glow by Andrew Kay, and our outro music is Voices by Alexander Shanekar. Transcripts and all our previous episodes are available at witchlitpod.com, and you can follow us on Instagram or Threads at witchlitpod. Please help other witches find us by leaving a rating or review wherever you listen to podcasts. And thank you for listening to and reading WitchLit.